The TeachPitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for TeachPitch, a global community of 50,000 subscribers from over 205 countries to date. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, people who've built hospitals, huge non-profit organizations, successful journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That's what we're going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
I was blessed that I had this uncle, Uncle Marvin, and the long story short is that he was the first person who asked me that very profound question, which was, how are you feeling? Mm-hmm. But he did it in a way like no one else had ever done it. He asked it with intention. He listened with intention and no judgment. And for whatever reason, other than, his compassion, his vulnerability, his beautiful soul, I decided to tell him all of the pain I was going through. Yeah. And when I shared what was happening, he didn't say, get over it, or, toughen up, or don't tell me these things, I can't handle it. He said, we're going to get through this together.
Yeah. And we're back, Natalie. How are you?
I'm good, Aldo, but the more important question is, how are you? You just got back into town?
I did. I mean, it's been quite a journey. Yeah, first of all, I think we live in different times when it comes to traveling. I used to travel so much, and now all of a sudden, with the pandemic, I haven't been in a plane for so long. So, just flying out, getting organized. I was really getting excited about it, right? Just to go out and attend something as big as the World Innovation Summit for Education. And then, the otherworldly feel of flying from Scotland, where I live, into Qatar, into Doha. That's just, such an amazing experience. So, and this has been, I think, the fifth or the sixth time that I've been there. But every time it really gets to me, just how well it's organized, this event, how warm the people receive you, and then all the things that you have to do. It's really a crazy event. So yeah, very happy I got to experience it to the fullest. The World Innovation Summit for Education 2021 edition, in Doha. So it was really nice. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you got to go. And this time you were able to go as an interviewer, right? You were given the opportunity to participate in interviewing many of the speakers of the summit. So how was that for you as an interviewer?
It was really good, but I don't want to be impolite because I also wanted to ask about the Utah snow. Natalie.
Utah snow. Yeah. That's right. I'm in Utah and we have gotten some good snow this winter already. The city where I live got about 2 inches, but the city where my parents live got 10 inches, which is really exciting for all the kids to play in.
I can imagine. And can you still leave the house, or is it too much?
It's okay now. The roads have been plowed now, but the night of the storm, driving was very difficult and it took hours to get anywhere. So I ended up having to sleep over and stay at my parents' house because I couldn't go home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It really snows you in there.
Yeah, it did this time for sure.
Wow. Well,
so we'll have a white Christmas.
A white Christmas. Well, that's something, right? That's at least something. And
yeah,
I really got the opportunity to talk to 8 wonderful guests in Doha, and it was really nice, and it was such a great pleasure to talk to them and really to have the time. Not only that, but I was given my own team in the absence of you, Natalie, I could work with Carly Bonavia, who I can highly recommend. She was working for the World Innovation Summit for Education, and she really helped me out with all the technicalities. So I had a camera on, so we have footage of all of these interviews, as well as very good sound quality interviews that were recorded. I had half an hour for each interview, and I believe 5 out of the 8 that I did were live streamed, and the other ones were just recorded for us to use at a later moment in time. And the first interview that I was so keen to launch is the interview with Dr. Marc Brackett, and he is the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Now, I am a big sucker for emotions and recognizing emotions and knowing what we feel rather than what we know. And I am an ally of Dr. Brackett in identifying emotions. So you better know yourself, but also you better know how to respond to specific situations, and you know how to kind of further take care of yourself, how to develop yourself further if you know which emotion you're going through. And Marc Brackett is all about that. And he wrote a great book, which is called Permission to Feel, which was published in 2019 already. And, I think he conquered the world with this book. So if you go to his website, which is marcbrackett.com, and it's M-A-R-C, so Marc with a C, and then Brackett, BRACKETT.com, then you will see more about his book, Permission to Feel, but also about the many great interviews that he did throughout the United States and with media all over the world. And I was so excited when I found out that he was a speaker at WISE, and I was, trying to get him down for an interview. Now, the funny thing was that we were in the same hotel. So we were assigned to the same hotel, and I already knew who he was, and I kept bumping into him in the hotel, but at very weird times. So I took it upon myself to go for an evening swim every time. And there was a beautiful pool there, which was on the rooftop of the hotel. And it was very warm and very pleasant. And I was the only one in the pool. And the other person, I swear to you, was Marc Brackett. and so I really felt like, okay, shall I ask him? Shall I not ask him? Because I hadn't booked him. And you can't just go right up to the guest and say, hey, do you want an interview? You need to follow a specific process, because otherwise loads of people get upset with you. But I was really tempted to just harass him in the pool and basically ask him, can I interview you? I ended up not doing it. I behaved. We got it all sorted via the PR people and the assistants and whoever more needs to make a decision on it. But I got him to sit down with me and to talk about Permission to Feel. Now, one of the things that made me fall in love even more with someone like Marc Brackett, I wasn't conscious of it, but just before summer in 2020, I was listening to a podcast of Brené Brown. She's got millions of podcast downloads, and she's not known as a podcaster. She is this world famous psychologist. She's just a phenomenal speaker. And I remember listening to this podcast, not having any idea who Marc Brackett was, but this interview was so amazing because it was all about recognizing our emotions and knowing what we're going through at a time where, everyone was in lockdown. So that lockdown brought along loads of emotions and loads of feelings. And I think that interview was just spot on. And I remember listening to that interview and saying, oh, this is such a relief. This is such a patch to the wounds to have such an interview and to have such people like Marc Brackett around. Not really being fully conscious of it being him. 18 months later, we're at a conference together. So I was just so grateful And in doing my research, I bumped into this interview, and then it was just like a big, like, oh my God, that was him. So I felt even more blessed that I kind of ran into him. And he did say that the interview with Brené Brown had 4 million downloads, which is just an amazing number, right? So that was really kind of a highlight for me. And yeah, so really great to run into him and to be able to speak to him. Now, for those of you who want to know more about the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence, we will be sure to include it all in our show notes. But be sure to follow Marc Brackett on social media, Marc with a C, and Brackett written BRACKETT.com. You're going to find a lot more about him. He talks about a great number of things, among others about his book Permission to Feel, but also, again, about the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence that he founded, as well as about Ruler, and more about that in the interview to find out more about how to recognize and how to deal with emotions. Enjoy this interview with Dr. Marc Brackett.
This episode of the Teach Pitch podcast was recorded at the World Innovation Summit for Education, WISE, in Doha on December 9th, 2021. We are extremely grateful to the Qatar Foundation and WISE team who supported and sponsored us in bringing this together. More information about the WISE Summit can be found on their website, wise-qatar.org. Thanks a lot, WISE.
A very good afternoon. I was looking, might have been whether it's morning or afternoon, but we are most definitely afternoon here from Doha at the World Innovation Summit for Education, where we've had the opportunity to speak to so many amazing people, expert leaders, NGO founders, CEOs, but then also professors and people who are so ingrained into academia in specific fields around learning, around development, and in this case around emotional intelligence. And I have the great privilege of sitting here next to Dr. Marc Brackett, who is the director of the Center of Emotional Intelligence at Yale, and the author of the amazing book Permission to Feel. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
Your work is so profound and so much needed. And I cannot emphasize that enough while reading about your work and seeing you speak here at WISE, but also listening to the amazing interview you did with Brené Brown. And I'll come back to that later because there are so many synergies and so many ding, ding, ding moments with that interview. I kind of, about the importance of emotions and recognizing emotions. Now, my take on this, when I first heard you speak about this, I said well, isn't already a lot being done on that? So I initially thought that a lot of people were already doing this in some shape or form. But then I realized that is the exact problem, that we think we're already doing stuff on it, and we're actually not. And that's where it escalates. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, I think, a lot of us, we overestimate our ability to read emotions, how skilled we are at labeling emotions and regulating emotions. So for me, I think what's interesting is that we are more unself-aware about emotions and emotional intelligence than we think we are.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I said, what has gotten into this situation? Because for me, emotions are so important, and it's so important to recognize them. But how come we are now somewhat in an era as human beings whereby we say, well, no, they're not important. We're practically ignoring them. What got us into this?
Well, it's history that got us into this.
Yeah.
Different kinds of philosophies, rule your feelings or they'll rule you, was a predominant way of thinking back, 19th century. I think also because, emotions are ephemeral. They're in our heads. They're not, as people thought, measurable. We now can measure our emotional lives using physiological measures, self-report measures, observation tools, performance tools. But for most, of psychology's history, emotions were, shoved under the rug
Yeah.
because people didn't know how to kind of study them.
Are we scared of them?
We are scared of them. Many people are scared of them because, people used to say emotions are idiosyncratic impulses that drive you to the dark side. That's not an adaptive value, right, model. I think what's unique about emotional intelligence is that we say, wait a minute, actually emotions ensure your survival.
Yeah.
Actually, emotions help you make more informed decisions.
Yeah.
But there was no science yet to prove that.
Yeah. And now we're kind of in an era where there is a science.
There is.
The emotion science, and you're flying the flag for that. And, that was one of the interesting things looking at the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale. As a research field, this must be a perpetual field. There's just so much to discover and to do, I can imagine.
Well, think about it. Before the pandemic, people had feelings, and during the pandemic, people had feelings. Now we're still in the pandemic, people are having feelings. And given that emotions drive so much of our creativity, our performance, our attention, everything, it's important to know, what emotions different people are having throughout these times, because otherwise we can't support them.
Yeah. This brings me to kind of an interesting thread. And I first want to kind of a specific call out for the Brené Brown podcast interview that you did. I listened to it in April 2020 when it came out.
Oh, interesting.
Of course, not realizing that I would have the great opportunity of speaking to you 1.5 years later. And it inspired me back then because I was in London and it was already getting warm, and it was like this first phase of lockdown and we couldn't leave the apartment. And then I saw this interview coming out about emotions and recognizing these emotions. And I so remembered, like, this guy's got it down. He knows so well what he's talking about. But I only recalled that I was inspired by that interview when I re-listened to it. That I was like, oh. And I was so inspired, first of all, by your Uncle Marvin.
Yeah.
Could you very quickly, for those who have not heard the interview, talk a little bit about your Uncle Marvin and how he got you on this path?
I was blessed in life because I had trauma in my childhood. I had abuse, I had bullying, and it was tough being me as a kid. And I had two parents who loved me dearly, but my mother had her own emotional challenges, and so did my father. But I was blessed that I had this Uncle Marvin, who happened to be a school teacher, who happened to be writing a curriculum to teach kids about emotions, who happened to be getting a master's degree in the town where I was growing up, who happened to stay with us in the summer. And the long story short is that he was the first person who asked me that very profound question, which was, how are you feeling? But he did it in a way like no one else had ever done it. He asked it with intention. He listened with intention and no judgment. And for whatever reason, other than, his compassion, his vulnerability, his beautiful soul, I decided to tell him all of the pain I was going through. And when I shared what was happening, he didn't say, get over it, or, toughen up, or don't tell me these things, I can't handle it. He said, we're going to get through this together.
Yeah.
And so, I'm on a mission to make sure that everybody has an Uncle Marvin. And what I find in education is that only about 1/3 of our nation's youth believe they have an adult who really, really cares about them.
Yeah.
Especially in school. And so that's heartbreaking to me because my Uncle Marvin changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And my hope is that more kids get an Uncle Marvin.
Yes. Or, some sort of guidance on the level of what their emotions can teach them, or what they're feeling, or someone who asks them in a profound way, how are you feeling?
And sticks with it.
Yeah.
Because, it's always, even when we ask people, like if I say to you, how are you feeling? We haven't even done that today, just so you know.
Yeah. I'm feeling great. I'm in a flow because I'm talking to you. Yeah.
I appreciate that. what if I were to say to you, I'm feeling this odd mixture of irritation, despair, loneliness, and frustration.
I mean, I would now say, because I've listened to you, I would say, let's talk about it. Where did that come from? But yes, normally.
And your typical day at work, right? You'd be like, oh no, like I got to deal with this person right now.
Yeah. It's like, oh, great, I would say.
Sorry about that. Good luck.
Yeah.
And I think this is the problem. You were going back to, about how we treat emotions, is that I don't think we have been trained as friends, as parents, as teachers. We are not prepared to deal with the feelings that we hear. So we don't really even ask. We actually say, like, how's it going?
Yeah.
Fine. And then you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was another thing that I wonder. It's like, where does that come from? Because the intent of asking another person, how are you? I think there's a good intention behind it. Right? It became a social convention to ask it. So there was originally the intention for it to be a genuine question. It's just like, we made it so repetitive in our daily lives. It's like there's no way to process all the answers, really, right? So,
well, I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Right? There is a way to process. Just, make emotions a critical part, of your relationships.
Yeah.
And then, we certainly have made the time to scroll through our freaking phones for 2 hours a day.
Yeah, definitely.
We've made the time to just stare at Netflix and other television shows for hours and hours. Why not make the time to connect emotionally?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't have the answer. No, you're very right. It's like, we're focused on processing things ourselves. We've become maybe more individualized and kind of trying to process our own, our own ideas, let alone the ideas and emotions of someone else. So, but.
And I think that we lose ourselves in technology, as one example, lose ourselves watching shows, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we are, I think, in many ways, forgetting what it means to be human.
Yeah, I think that's a very profound message, and I think you're right. Let's talk about what we can do, because in your great book, Permission to Feel, and big plug, big shout out for that book, you do not only make the observation, but you also share a solution, right?
Correct.
In a certain way, and that solution is called, the abbreviation of the solution or of the approach is called Ruler.
Correct.
Talk me a little bit through
Sure.
Ruler. Yeah.
So Ruler is a set of skills that have to be acquired. I'm going to repeat that. They're not innate. They have to be acquired through formal instruction and informal instruction that involve recognizing emotions in ourselves and others. So how am I feeling? How are you feeling? Am I reading you accurately, or am I attributing emotion to you?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding emotions. So what's the difference between anger and disappointment, frustration and anger? Most people don't know those differences.
Yeah.
They clump them into upset. Labeling emotions, having that vocabulary to be precise about our feelings. So if you're angry, are you peeved or are you enraged? The E stands for expressing emotions, knowing how and when to express emotions, understanding there are cultural differences.
Yeah.
And then the final R has to do with regulating emotions, those strategies that we do to manage the ups and downs and everything in between.
So recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating. And as you said, it's not something it's not like a reminder. It's something we need to really make ourselves familiar with as an approach.
Correct.
To kind of work on that. And
it needs formal instruction from birth till tomb.
Yeah.
And I say that, not jokingly. The minute you think, I've got this, someone will arrive in your life who will drive you out of your mind and show to you that you don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened to you?
I don't know if out of your mind, but yes, definitely that the reaction came about that I wasn't.
I don't want to be with this person,
oh
my gosh, I don't know what to do with this person, or they just, have you ever worked with someone who was difficult?
Yeah. Yes, most definitely. Yeah.
So that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Life happens.
Yeah.
We lose people we love.
Yeah.
People who love us don't want to love us anymore.
Yeah.
And so this is why this set of skills is something that we have to continuously develop and
Yeah.
practice. It's
Yeah.
not like counting your change at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Like, I figured out, I went to the coffee shop this morning. I paid 22 Qataris, or whatever the term is, for my coffee. I realized that it was like $5.50, which I thought was expensive, but I had a feeling about it, but I let it go. But the math was there, right? The math is clear. I got it. But on my way here, there was a flight delay for 4 hours. I was sitting in the plane, and I was just like, what is happening? You
Yeah.
know, and so dealing with our lives and our feelings is just a different beast.
Yeah, yeah, and it takes continuous kind of fine tuning and continuous understanding. Let's talk about, we are here at the World Innovations Summit for Education. It's focused on the next generation. It's focused on students. One of the things I thought, so I have a 2-year-old daughter, and she has currently toddler tantrums.
Sure.
So
how does that make you feel?
It two sides. Let's talk about me here. No. So two sides. So on one end, I'm completely okay with it until the moment that the tantrum. So now it's in a phase that she also starts hitting. So she's upset and she starts throwing with things and she starts hitting me and her mom, and that gets me upset. And the reason it gets me upset is because I thought, okay, I've done something wrong.
You're raising a beast.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. So I'm upset with myself. It's like, oh, why are we hitting? It's like, don't hit.
Hopefully she's not observing that at home.
Yeah. So
throwing your, I hate this coffee.
Yeah. Now, so we're trying to teach her that, okay, it's okay if you're upset. It's okay if you have that emotion, but throwing with things or hitting people, or also hitting yourself, is not the way to go here. So, but it's a 2-year-old, so she, you can have a sit down conversation with her. You kind of need to find ways to do that. What kind of my point in this is that, like, I almost feel that there's her world with her emotions, and then there's the world of the adults. And I kind of in education, also in light with what you just said, that it's a kind of cradle to grave thing. These are not two separate worlds. This is just one world of us human beings.
Correct. And, this is why parents and teachers need to be trained in child development.
Yeah.
You can't have an expectation, right? Like, you don't, because you're a smart guy, that your child is going to understand their behavior at 2 years old. So the question is, how do you coach your child when they're 2 years old to have their feelings but not throw things?
Yeah.
And so that's the hard work.
Yeah.
And by the way, when your kid is 18 years old and they come home and having had too many alcoholic beverages and they start yelling at you, you'll need more strategies then.
No, definitely. There's so much more to come. Yeah, no.
It's endless.
My point in that is, and this is also what has been addressed a few times, is we can learn as adults, as teachers, we can learn as much from the emotions of children and students as much as the other way around.
Yes. I mean, one of the gifts, if you can handle the gift, right, is when you get triggered by your kid or your wife or anyone, is to just sit with that and observe it.
Yeah.
And really try to think about, like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Why am I so activated? What's going on in my brain, my body? It's funny, I don't know if you get ever activated by your wife. Does she ever drive you a
little impatient, yeah. So they're like, okay, what are we doing now? Yeah. Uh-huh. Don't tell her.
Not that you just did it. My partner, for example, we have disagreements about what things to buy.
Yeah.
And I realized that I get so triggered by things like that. And then I realized one day, I'm like, I figured it out. Like, this is my father. I become my father. My father was cheap about everything, and everything was a ripoff.
Yeah.
That's a ripoff. Yeah. And I just learned growing up that everything's a ripoff.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, okay, Mark, you've become your father. Congratulations. It's like, what's the real feeling here? Like, and so that reflection, that pausing, is all part of developing the skill. Like, what am I really feeling here? What's my strategy for communicating this, to someone? That's all the stuff that we don't really learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. And we can talk for hours about this specific field, but let's go to your message for people to rethink education.
Sure.
So the process of teaching and learning.
Yeah.
So you basically said that, the field of emotion science should become kind of a go-to in all schools.
Correct.
As a curricular topic, or how would you?
Curricular topic.
Okay.
From preschool to high school to college to the workplace. And I believe it's a human right for children to get an emotion education, because we spend so much time helping children develop frameworks and lexicons for things like general literacy or, whatever subject area they're fascinated by, whether it be, a science class or a math class. You learn terms like addition, subtraction, fractions, geometry, but we don't provide children with access to language to describe their inner experiences.
Yeah.
And so imagine what it's like to go through life without being able to articulate what you're feeling.
Yeah.
We know what happens. Drugs, alcohol, abuse.
Yeah.
Because your feelings have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you can't communicate them, and if you can't get your needs met, it's a tough life.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about the practical implementation.
Sure.
So because you've developed Ruler, and I was happy to read that it's already kind of been working in thousands of schools.
Correct.
Could you talk a little bit about the response,
Yeah.
of these schools to the approach?
So Ruler is an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning. It's in 27 countries and over 3,000 schools, and we've reached well over 4 million children at this point.
Wow.
And it's a process of working with the adults who are leading schools, the teachers, the counselors, the support staff, students, and their families. And now that we're still going through this pandemic, I think it's interesting to share that, we had so many schools reach out to us for training during the pandemic. We thought we were going to have to shut down, but nevertheless, we were booked solid. And when I was talking with those schools, they said, we finally realized that we need this.
Yeah.
But I think more interestingly, the schools that have been using Ruler for many years, when we spoke to them, they said, thank goodness we had this training. Because we had so many more tools available to us to manage all of the anxiety, fear, stress, etc., that we had, when this pandemic hit. Yeah. And so I think for me, what's, I'm most happy about is that it's a prevention tool. Yeah. And I think that, we don't talk enough about prevention. We talk a lot about intervention. Yeah. Once the child has a nervous breakdown. Yeah, once it happens. Once the child, throws the desk across the room. Yeah. We bring in the experts. Yeah. And we just don't spend enough time thinking about what are the underlying social emotional skills that we can teach children from a very young age that will prevent all these things from happening. Yeah. And so Ruler really is both a prevention and an intervention. Yeah. And it's a set of tools like the mood meter. Yeah. Actually, we have a new app that's being released. It's very exciting. It's done in collaboration with the founder of Pinterest and a team that will help people label their emotions and track their feelings over time and regulate their feelings. That'll be available for free in about 2 months.
Is it also called Ruler, the app? Or
it's called How We Feel.
How We Feel, okay.
And actually the precursor to that app called the Mood Meter app is available now. You can just go to the Apple Store or Android. It's moodmeterapp.com. Okay. It's giving people actual tools to support them in being self-aware and having the language to communicate and the strategies to regulate. Yeah. And so that's what we're all about.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So for the teachers listening in now on the Teach Pitch podcast, but also through Wise on Air, how can they get involved? Should they go to a website, or how can they get a journey started?
So one is, obviously, you can read my book, which is called Permission to Feel. Thank you for sharing that earlier. The second is we actually built a course that's available for free for teachers across the world. It's called Managing Emotions During Uncertain and Stressful Times. It's on Coursera. Okay. And anybody could log in and take it for free. I think we've had 100,000 educators join so far. Wow. And then the third, if you are a school leader or teacher who really want to do this work deeply in your school, it's Ruler Approach, RULER approach.org. And that's where you can sign up for training and really think about embedding this systemically into your school.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And we will be sure to include all of this in our show notes. So, people know where to find it and that all links are available and people can navigate their way through it. Because the more people use this, the better this world becomes. And that's what we're all about, right?
It's the emotion revolution, my friend.
Exactly. A little bit kind of about what inspired you on your journey. So any kind of reading in terms of articles or a book or a website that has inspired you on your journey?
Well, obviously I was inspired by my uncle's curriculum because I think what he did with me, as I think about it today, he would have me type up some of his lessons when I was a kid. And we'd have conversations in the backyard about words like alienation and elation and all these kind of interesting emotion words, share our stories around them. So that's my number one inspiration. I mean, in my career, I've been inspired by my mentors who are Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer, who are the original theorists around emotional intelligence. And so when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I was reading a lot of self-help books. I was in therapy, just to be fully transparent. Like, what am I going to do with my life? I don't even know. And I was anxious and, history repeated itself with me. And I came across this article in Time magazine on emotional intelligence. And I learned that there were these two psychologists that had written a theory. And it just made me remember all of the things that my uncle and I talked about when I was a teenager. So I called my uncle and I said, "You're coming out of retirement and we're writing a book together," which was our first curriculum. And then I reached out to these two professors and they both were kind and set up meetings with me. And I got my PhD with one of them and became a professor with the other one.
That was really meant to be, right? That's kind of
it was like the perfect storm for my professional development.
Yeah. And I'm so happy you went through this, because now you have this treasure, which is called permission to feel, that you have given to all of us, as well as the ruler approach. What's next for the Center of Emotional Intelligence? I mean, you're very busy, but how is this further going to develop?
It's very interesting, because when you write a book that it's popular, and always people, what's your next book? And what's this? What's the next? What's the next? What's next? And I tell people, I'm not that kind of psychologist. Firstly, I don't know if I have many more ideas. I'm like saturated with everything I've done already. And so, I have plenty of ideas. I sound like I'm hopeless. I'm full of millions of ideas.
Yeah.
But for me, what's most important is going deeper.
Yeah.
Because everybody's always the question, right? No offense to you, but the question is always like, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing next. It's like,
yeah,
we still have to learn how to regulate our feelings. We still have to label them better.
Sure.
Can we just pause?
Yeah.
And really work on our own development and give this area of our brains, of our bodies, of our relationships, the attention that it needs?
Yeah.
Because this is, I think, why, honestly, and I'm thinking about this now because it's been 30 years since emotional intelligence was first coined.
Yeah.
It's been 25 years that this field that I'm a part of called social and emotional learning has been around. Everybody's got interventions. There's more books. There's more curriculum than you could imagine. And the mental health across the world is the worst it's ever been.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you?
It's not properly executed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're not implementing.
Yeah.
We're not going deeper.
Yeah.
And I think the time has come for us to take really seriously people's emotion education.
Yeah. Definitely, and I'm an ally. And apologies for asking what's next. I shouldn't do that.
No.
I'm a victim.
You're allowed
of this
to do it.
Fast-paced
But
society.
what's next is continuing to do the hard work to get greater sustainability.
100%. And again, wherever we can help, we will do so. Now, very last question. Let's turn the tables. This is your podcast.
Yep.
Who would you want to interview?
Well, it's funny because the podcast that I had done with Brene Brown was so popular. I think over 4 million people downloaded it.
Yeah.
And now she has a book that she's released on emotions. And so I think it would be a fabulous conversation, to to swap seats
Yeah.
and really just try to unpack. I'm more interested in her emotional life personally
Yeah.
than, talking about the book itself.
Yeah.
People can read the book,
Yeah.
but for me, if I were to do a podcast, it would be unpacking her emotional life.
Yeah. Brené Brown, if you're listening to this, we're going to invite you for a podcast now, and I'll be listening in. Dr. Marc Brackett, thank you so much for permission to feel. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you so much for being present here at the World Innovation Summit for Education. I wish you all the best. Thank you for this talk.
Thank you.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.